Welcome to the Nerd Party.
Welcome back to Houselights, our director discussion show here on the Nerd Party Network. This week, we're continuing with The Wing of Sherlock as we examine different directors, actors, and interpretation of the famed British detective. The 7% Solution might be up there for most unusual title we've covered, but that's all right. Nicole Williamson is our star as Sherlock Holmes, but top billing does go to Alan Arkin for Dr. Sigmund Freud. I'm your host this evening, Darren Moser, and I'm just so excited for the initial run of my new train, locomotive, and carriage. Hope nothing happens to it. And I'm joined again by Dr. Tristan Riddell and Dr. John Mills. You decide what their professions are. Well, let's mix up that 7% Solution, look but not touch, in the wing of Sherlock Holmes. That title is so strange.
Just to clarify, audience, we are not going to be mixing up a 7% solution tonight.
We're not.
But what does that mean, Tristan?
That really throws off my plans for the evening, but fine. Thanks for the curveball on that one. I'll put my little vials away here. Thank you very much.
I always get it mixed up. Is it heroin or cocaine that the solution is? It's heroin,
cocaine.
Right?
It's cocaine.
No, it's cocaine. But I think, I don't know. I haven't read the book or anything, but I always thought he had a heroin addiction, and it's changed to cocaine for Freud, because Freud was a big cocaine guy, right?
Yeah. It was in the books, as far as I remember, it's heroin, exactly like you said. But 7% Solution is 7% cocaine and then 93% saline.
Jeez.
But in defense of the concept, a lot of people were very strong advocates of cocaine for any number of reasons. Very significantly, Sigmund Freud.
Oh, back then, yeah.
Yeah, who was...
He prescribed it. Like, he would prescribe it and thought
part
like
of your
it was
pharmacy.
I think it wasn't until his friend died, because I think he gave his friend cocaine to help with his opioid addiction.
Yes.
So out of one fire and into the other. Jeez.
Yeah, and then the guy ended up, killing himself because of his addictions to both, and that's when Freud was like, you know what? Maybe I need to rethink this narcotics thing. And he did, and he became a huge opponent to it in later years of his life and actually spoke against it, wrote articles about it, everything like that.
The important thing to keep in mind, though, is as we watch this film, the romanticized vision of Freud has faded over time. I read a book a year or so ago. But Freud was in the title, but I forget what the subtitle was, but it was like a 600-page book. And this author really went to town on Freud, like completely dismantled all of the mythos around him, including the fact that his advocacy for cocaine was basically him stealing stuff from other people because he just wanted to be famous above all and stuff like that. But in the 1970s, that wasn't people's vision of Sigmund Freud. So Alan Arkin's portrayal of him here is completely in line with what people thought.
So I think I read somewhere where Alan Arkin did research on Sigmund Freud, and he's just like, this guy is a jackass.
Indeed he was.
And then he started talking with the director about it, and he figured out that the writer, who we all know and love, his father was Nicholas Meyer's father was a psychologist or psychiatrist, and so Alan Arkin thinks that it's more of a portrayal of Mr. Meyer than Sigmund Freud.
That would be fair.
Well, and this is one of those interesting stories where you have a legitimate real person integrated into a story of a fictional person. So you have, Sherlock Holmes was not a real person as a character, but Sigmund Freud, we're going to definitely look at a harsher lens because he is a real person who had real opinions and real impact on society.
Just to follow up what you're saying there, and I know we're starting off on a weird tip here, but my daughter came in while I was watching 7% Solution, the 17-year-old, not the 10-year-old.
Right. Which
And,
scene? Which scene?
Well, it was, oh my gosh, it was, I think there was about 30, 40 minutes left. And Holmes and Freud are talking. And I explained the concept of the movie. I'm like, Sigmund Freud and Sherlock Holmes team up. And she goes, but they never met. And I go, well, yeah. She goes, so why is the movie putting them together? I was like, because Sherlock Holmes never existed. So it's sort of like a historical fiction sort of thing. She goes, what? He never existed? I said, you thought Sherlock Holmes was a real person? So I have to dig a little deeper.
The more you know.
No, but the thing is, I got to dig a little deeper. It's entirely possible that a kid, like I probably would have thought Sherlock Holmes was a real dude when I was younger. You know, like, I don't know.
Do you guys remember in 2012 when we had the 100-year anniversary of Titanic? And, documentaries were coming out and people were talking about it, and all these young people were like, wait, that wasn't just a movie with Jack and Rose? Like,
no, I remember that.
Mm-hmm.
Like, that was a real thing? I was just like, oh, no.
Right,
kids
when
these days.
Your knowledge begins
days.
and ends with the James Cameron movie. And, I mean, we laugh at it, but honestly, unless someone tells you and you're little, you have no way of knowing what is and isn't real.
Yeah. Or, I mean, my gosh, the way curricula has changed over time, I think they'll never get around to working 7% solution into the school reading curriculum. So,
that's why we're here on Houselights, to complete the education. No,
bringing it back around.
So, okay, so we're looking at Sherlock. Again, this is a very interesting story in that it's kind of a dual protagonist way. Like, obviously Sherlock is Sherlock's and Watson's kind of there, but like Freud kind of sucks up a lot of the Watson air. Like a lot, I think that would have been kind of given to Watson was spoken by Freud. And you also have, this for us on Houselights, we jumped from 59 to now 76. So another couple of decades into what I kind of feel is the first legitimate, maybe that's not the right word, but like this, what is being carried in this performance is, I think, cinema has become cinema. The story is well pulled out. We're meeting a historical real world figure. So all that to say, that's the big wind up for my question. So John, when you were coming into this, were you expecting more Holmes-y sayings and little pieces, like where he's kind of caricature, or were you expecting this to kind of, he's meeting a real person, it's going to be grounded in more reality? Like how was that approaching it?
I was stunned, honestly, because I didn't know anything except the fact that Nicholas Meyer had written it and that Sigmund Freud was in it. I was stunned with the way the story progressed, because this is one of those things where I looked forward to, how are they going to meet up? And I think that the beginning part of this film, you're left a lot. I think the reason you're talking about Freud resonating so much is I think the movie doesn't really come together until Freud comes in. And I mean that in the most negative sort of sense, because until Freud comes in, I'm sitting there sort of like, what are we even doing here? It shoddily sets up its premise where it's like, okay, so Watson is the narrator and he's copping to the fact that he wrote fantasy stories based on his friend Sherlock Holmes. And this is the real Sherlock. And I'm like, there's a whole lot here that could have been sussed out a lot cleaner. And then you have Holmes is now an addict and he's talking about Moriarty. And the first sense where I knew I was going to have a little trouble plugging into things is those first flashes of him as a child walking up the staircase come out of nowhere, but there's nothing, like it's just smashed together in the edit, as opposed to some sort of like a dream look to it or anything like that.
Right. It just looks like night.
Right. And it's a kid walking up and I'm like, oh, it's it. But there's like no narration over to be like, I remember walking up the stairs, Watson. And it's like, what stairs, Holmes? It's just all of a sudden there's a kid walking up the stairs. And I'm like, what? Wait, what? And so, yeah, I think what you're reacting to is that Holmes is not terribly well defined until he's given Freud to play against.
Yeah, I kind of agree. The beginning pieces with Moriarty, while they felt kind of added to play in the home sandbox, like the traditional. He's in London. It's after Moriarty, but it was almost kind of disjointed. And then, like you said, it did kind of pick up once they got him on the hunt, the false hunt to get to Sigmund, which I thought was really clever. How they're like, how we have to trick him to get him over there. But what about you, Tristan? Like the first act, how is that kind of coming across, especially on a lesser known story, as far as it's not Baskerville, it's not, the big one. We hear Moriarty's name thrown around a lot, but is it connecting, or are you having to jump between trains at the beginning?
I think it's connecting. I think it's all making sense. But I think the structure is probably the worst thing about this movie, where it wasn't, because, like John was talking about, you're just kind of spinning your wheels a little bit. You're just like, where is this going? What's going on? And then once you get to Freud, you're like, okay, cool. This is going to be about his recovery. Maybe we'll discover some hidden truths. Maybe we'll do some throwbacks to some other cases, or maybe we'll have like a retrospective with Watson and helping, Sherlock get through it, like at his bedside. But then we shift gears again at, I think, over the hour mark. We're past the half point. And then all of a sudden there's a case that's, thrown in his lap. And and you're just like, wait a second, is this going to be a Sherlock Holmes mystery now? And we're past the half mark. What movie does this want to be? And I think that's what I really struggled with. Now, before we keep going, I do want to talk about Herbert Ross, the director. So this was directed by Herbert Ross, written by Nicholas Meyer, that was based off his own book. And his own book was a huge success. Like, everybody loved the book. Everyone bought the book. It was a financial success. Thus, that's why they made a movie. Now, Herbert Ross is a very well-known director, but he also is a choreographer. And I think that in itself is really, really cool when you see directors come from a different kind of background other than writer or actor or things like that. So like he did the choreography for Dr. Dolittle and Who's Afraid for Virginia Woolf, The Fantastics, and a lot of really fun stuff. But as a director, he has done Funny Lady, Played Again Sam. He did The Goodbye Girl, Footloose, The Secret of My Success with Michael J. Fox, Steel Magnolias, My Blue Heaven, True Colors, Undercover Blues, which I freaking love. That's one of my favorite movies when I was a kid, is Undercover Blues. And Boys on the Side was his last film in '95. So this director is a director. Like he knows what he's doing. He comes from a really interesting background. And I want to know from you guys, like, are you guys familiar with his work at all? Besides Footloose, obviously, like everybody's seen Footloose and knows it. But were either of you guys aware of Herbert Ross's work before you went into this?
Unwittingly familiar with some of his films is what I would say.
Yeah.
Like the director of Footloose doesn't enter my brain. And you say director of Footloose, I was like, oh yeah, okay. But Play It Again Sam in my brain is always, because he stars in it, I'm like, oh, I thought Woody Allen directed that. Like, I have to be reminded somebody else directed that every single time. And it's like, because Woody Allen is the star, and I just presume Woody Allen directed it because that's usually how that went. But yeah, I guess I didn't pay any attention that he did My Blue Heaven, which it's actually a pretty funny movie. Actually, Steve Martin really having fun with that with Rick Moranis.
Yeah, it's kind of the same, like back when we did McTiernan, where like you kind of knew the name, but I'd never sat down and been like, oh, what has he done? And you start to find all these little check boxes of, oh, I know that one. But it is kind of before the era of, Spielberg and the named known director, where you like, oh, I went to that movie because it's a Spielberg. It wasn't like, oh, I'm going to go see a Ross movie. It's like, no, that we weren't there yet. Nothing against the director. It's just wasn't the era of the named and promoted director as part of that process. So, okay, well, let's talk a bit about, we've touched a bit on the editing and pacing. And as we're talking about Herbert Ross with directing, there's definitely some standout scenes in this movie. The horse sequence is really engaging as they're, trying to not be I'm not saying it's the greatest thing. I'm just saying it's engaging. But I will say,
I love that.
I will say though, that overall, as we often will remark here on Houselights, I felt really good about spatiality and placement over. Like, I knew where I was in the hospital. I knew where I was on, like, anytime they're retreading or revisiting a place, it was very easy to tell where things were, where rooms connected to rooms and buildings to buildings in a general sense. Like, I really enjoyed that. It never felt like, oh, we turned a corner and I'm lost, even though I've never been in this fictional, not fictional city, but fictional story. But were there any...
We don't know if Vienna is real. We don't know.
Until I go there personally, I can't confirm that it's real. So,
all right, the Vienna of Holmes era.
See, this is the thing. This is what I'll say. Since with Ross as a director and everything, even when I think about the movies of his that I have seen in addition to this, Ross, I think you're right, Darren. I'm not going to go see the new Herbert Ross movie. He's going to put it together. He knows how to get the shot, get the actors to perform, and then sit in the editing bay with the editor and assemble things. There's nothing about this film, while I don't lose a sense of place. I mean, it's very aided by the fact, of course, like you said, Tristan, Vienna's real. But it's one of those things where, while I never lose my sense of place, there's nothing really innovative happening. Like, when you referenced Hound of the Baskervilles before, I can look at a Hammer film and I can say, that's a Hammer film. I look at this and I say, this is pretty much almost every British movie I've ever seen from the 70s, with the way that it's lit and the filters and all of that type of stuff. Like, it's very, okay, guys, we got to put film together. This is what we do. We pull this off the shelf. We set the camera up and we go. And I would say that also taking his whole body of work in addition to the sense of place that you're calling out, I don't get the sense of a director that is giving his actors a lot of direction. And what I mean by that is, he seems to be saying to them, and this can be a great positive as well, you're the pros, you figure it out. I don't get a sense it's unfair, but like when I watch like a David Fincher movie, I can tell that Fincher is sitting there and there's a certain point at which an actor might be like, well, I think this, and Fincher will be like, that's great, but that doesn't go in line with what I'm trying to do here. So tap that down. Whereas this feels much more like, yeah, cool, run with that. We'll put it all together and we'll see how that works. And I think that, that's the thing I struggle with most is the direction in this movie.
Clint Eastwood is the kind of director that you're talking about, where he'll get veterans and like Morgan Freeman, and he'll just go up to Freeman and so go, you got it? He's like, yep. And then he yells action and that's it. And Morgan, like, I think one time there was an interview where like somebody asked Morgan Freeman, like, what's your least favorite kind of direction to get from a director? And he goes, direction.
I kind of,
of course, because he's Morgan Freeman, he's allowed to say that.
Well, yeah, and say it in his voice. Now, looking around onto the cast, Alan Arkin is definitely also one of those names that, like, you've heard a million times. Maybe you associate him with a specific role. The most recent thing I could remember him off the top of my head would have been 2008 Get Smart. He was the chief in that, and that was a fun little comedy role, but obviously a huge body of work going back decades. But in this one, like I've stated in some of our other Sherlock escapades, they're so much younger than the more recent work. I know that's how aging works, but just seeing him, he's got full beard, he's just, I think he was really well cast in the version of Freud we got. Like, I enjoyed it not being to like the point you said, John, about this was a high point for Freud as far as how people considered him. So he wasn't a caricature. They were trying to take it kind of in a serious way. And you could picture the elevator pitch of like, what if Sigmund Freud met, and helped try to cure Sherlock Holmes of his addiction. And they even are giving him high marks toward the end when he's trying to figure stuff out. And he's like, oh, brilliant. I would have figured it out the same way. And Watson's just standing there, holding up the wall and doing nothing. But Tristan, we've talked about protagonist confusion and things like that. Does it get that far in the 7% solution where it starts to like, whose movie is this? Is Feud, coming across, or sorry, that's not Feud, Freud, Sigmund Freud coming across so strong, or is he just the lead in that part of the story?
I was confused at first. Like I thought it was going to be, I was confused about my lack of confusion. I felt like it was okay the way that they did it, because when I saw that Alan Arkin got top billing, I was a little confused. I was like, is this going to be a Freud movie with Sherlock Holmes? Is it going to be a Sherlock Holmes movie with Freud in it? And it's just Alan Arkin is the bigger name, and so he gets top billing. But then we get a lot of Robert Duvall as Watson at the beginning. So, and I'm just like, okay, so is it Duvall's picture? Because we've seen that before, like Sherlock through the eyes of Watson. I mean, that basically is the shtick of all of Sherlock Holmes. But regardless, I feel like it is a Sherlock Holmes movie that is much more ensemble than we're used to. I truly believe that I didn't have any protagonist confusion because everything was centered around Sherlock. That's the only reason why everyone was together. Right. Was because of Sherlock. And I think that really grounded it.
Tricking you into going to Vienna.
Because the only reason why Watson is going to Freud is because Sherlock is sick. The only reason why Sherlock is there is because he's, working with Freud. The only reason why Freud is helping out trying to solve the kidnapping case is because Sherlock is there working with him. So it's all around him. It's all centered around him, even if he's not in every single scene.
Yeah, I think that a lot of this is, I think part of the issue is that it feels very, it's put together in a very bookish sort of way. This feels like a story I want to read instead of watch. And I think that's not to its credit. But I think that the other thing with the gear shift is that you wind up when Vanessa Redgrave's character pops up. I was sort of just, I don't know, it was just sort of flat for me because it felt like, well, here's another thing. And then when we get to Freud psychoanalyzing him with hypnosis at the end, I'm like, by the time we got to that, I was like, oh, right. Oh, okay. That's right. That has to do with the thing from the beginning. Okay. And Moriarty being all coy and everything. And I can honestly say that when we got to that point, and we find out that, Holmes's fixation on Moriarty was why it was, I thought it was just weird because it actually left more questions than answers sort of thing. It felt like a very tossed off pop psychoanalysis type of thing to be like, oh, well, he hates Moriarty because Moriarty was having an affair with his mom who got shot by his dad in front of her face, but Moriarty's still alive for some reason. For some reason. What?
The Moriarty part was odd to me because, and maybe on a rewatch it might make more sense. Probably not. But the fact that they're introducing a third layer to the story, which is that Watson is kind of an unreliable narrator when he's told stories about Holmes, that there is a real person named Moriarty, but his interaction with Holmes isn't maybe what you think it is. And I'm like, that's kind of a step too far for me. I'm like, I understand it's meant to be, memoirs and kind of like that, but it's like in this world that I'm already accepting that he knows Freud, like I need Moriarty to be Moriarty. And that's just what it is in the stories. And the fact that it became an extra
for that reveal.
thing. And it's like he's not even the rest of the movie. He's just gone. And I'm like, like they kept chasing that one super sketch guy, and I'm like, is that Moriarty? Maybe. Is he coming back? I don't. Yeah, I think once they started saying like Moriarty is helping us trick you into going to Freud, I'm like, you're kind of losing me here. Like this is getting. I don't need a redemption of Moriarty, and he was just misdefined. But that doesn't make sense.
But that even breaks into, like one of the issues is it's one thing to pick up a book and be like, oh, this is another author's spin on Holmes.
Right.
You come into this.
The Holmes verse is getting messed up.
The Holmes verse is handled by multiple people at multiple times from multiple studios. And this is one of those things where it's like, well, here's a different take on Holmes. Sure hope you know who he was before we started deconstructing him here. And it's like, I think maybe that's what we're all looking for, is some sort of establishment in the beginning of Holmes as a detective before his fall, or some flashback to before the 7% solution got a hold of him. So that if I come into this movie cold, this is my first Sherlock Holmes movie, I don't know why I should give a damn that he's a cocaine addict or not. Like, it's just people telling
really
me.
Bad if this is your first Holmes movie. This is a terrible one to start off of.
Exactly. But that's a problem for me because it's not even part of like a series or anything. It's like, oh yeah, that character Sherlock Holmes, this is our spin on him. And I'm like, well, your spin on which version of him? Because there are different versions of him out there.
And that's true. It being a Nicholas Meyer, this is probably was not as much of an issue in the 70s because people knew the book. They knew it was written by Meyer, like, as opposed to in my mind, I'm still thinking Arthur Conan Doyle, like as if he wrote this, which he obviously didn't. And that starts to detract it from making as much sense. But well, Tristan, I want to get your point of view on Robert Duvall, probably one of the other biggest names of this cast, as Watson, and in my opinion, fairly well cast. Like, it was a really nice little role for him. Unfortunately, having to share a lot of that, with the Freud character, as we discussed, taking a lot of his pieces. But from what we did get, how did you feel from the other Watson portrayals we've seen so far, or even in your own mind, this stacked up?
Well, as our third one, he was definitely the most competent, even though, with the second, with Baskervilles of 59, you didn't have a bumbling fool, but he was still kind of at the mercy of Sherlock Holmes, where in the 39, it was just him walking around going, murder? And so with Robert Duvall, you actually feel like this guy, Robert Duvall has a presence. There's a reason why he's a movie star. And it's crazy that we just lost him at the time of this recording. We lost him last week, 2 weeks ago, something like that.
Very, very short time ago. Yeah.
And it's I think it was really nice to see him at the beginning and how he was working, because it very much felt like the Watson you used to read. And I feel like this was a very accurate portrayal of what we hoped Watson to be and what we picture Watson to be while we're reading Sir Arthur Conan Doyle, but in very, very accurate Holmesian style. As the movie goes on, as the tale goes on, Watson just kind of stands in the background and goes, really? Wow. How'd you figure that out? And then we just have exposition scenes. So I feel like it was a really strong role for him at the beginning, but then he just kind of fell into the set dressing.
Yeah, and I think we're all kind of on the same page that it really is Freud. And again, nothing against Arkin, it's just the character of Freud. Like, he sucks up all the air that Watson was there to breathe, and there's no room left for him. And I get making a story about a Holmes equal, someone who is also very clever and smart and of science, and so I get the idea of putting them together. And, even throwing in, he could cure him of his addiction, but we'll just change the addiction and make it match for some reason. But yeah, all that to say, I'm glad this isn't one of those. And then Lestrade shows up, and then, it's like, no. We don't need all the random Holmes characters showing up here.
Yeah, but since Holmes is central, I will step back and say that Nicol Williamson's Holmes, I think once the film figures out how to spotlight what he's doing, how to give him the space to be Holmes, I think he's very interesting as Holmes. And I think that's enough to hang your hat on for all of the other flaws that are going on. But in terms of the characters that they bring in, based on what I was reading, it said that the back half of this movie is changed from the novel. So basically, if you were to read the novel, the back half of this story is not recognizable. So, I mean, Tristan, and Darren, like, are either of you intrigued from this to go and read the book? Is there enough here where you're like, you know what, I would like to go read the book to figure out how it's different?
I would skim it.
I'm going to wait for them to turn the book into a movie, and then I'll let you know. No, I don't know. Only the name Meyer gives me an even inkling of maybe wanting to sit down with it.
Same
because
here.
Of his other work, especially in Star Trek and such. But I just know of my amount of time I have to dedicate to something like that. It would fall off. It would not happen. Just
That's
if
fair.
I was honest with myself. But so okay, rounding out a bit of the cast, we have Vanessa Redgrave as Lola Devereaux, and this was really interesting to me because not only is she kind of like in the 2.5 act section, like again, it's kind of really weird when she comes in, but for me, so I'm a huge Hercule Poirot fan. That's my favorite detective. And I had to make sure I didn't say Belgian detective and I said British detective at the beginning of this episode. But all that to say, it was just interesting, the semi-trope of, the detective kind of falling for, a baroness or a person of high society, what did you guys think about sprinkling in this bit of, they're on the ship together and he saved her, and like, is this going to be a relationship? I don't even know what this is. It's so bizarre, but
it made as much sense as the tennis match.
Yes.
Oh, was that tennis? What sport was that?
That was not tennis.
I felt like spring ball in DS9, whatever that one was. That's what it felt like.
It felt like that one that I've seen that like gets played in Miami but like instead of rackets, it's got like these almost like quasi lacrosse things.
With highlight?
Sure, why not? But
yeah, you're talking about highlight.
They throw it like up at the wall and it bounces down and stuff like that. That's what I thought of. I'd rather talk about that than the terrible idea of putting two newly recovering addicts on a cruise together for God knows where to put them in a relationship. They're not.
She looked high sitting in that chair. I'm pretty sure she has a stash. Like,
I'm going to say this is not the best step for an ongoing recovery, but that ending was interesting. The problem for me is that I can't think of Vanessa Redgrave without thinking of The Simpsons, where Sideshow Bob is in prison and he's talking about the terrible state of television. And he overhears a Fox promo for Vanessa Redgrave in a new, naughty granny sitcom. He goes, "Farewell, Vanessa." I think that it's weird because Redgrave's character feels, she's just a plot device. And it's like, there's almost a sense, even though it's always unfair to say something like this, why did you bother casting Vanessa Redgrave in it? Like, it feels like a massive waste of talent. Like that's a talent that you write up for, where you say, oh God, we got Redgrave. Okay, well, we got to redo this character to give her something more substantial. And it feels like they cast Redgrave and they were like, character's fine. Just leave it the way it is. And it's like, that's no fun.
It's the definition of damsel in distress. Like, she has practically no agency the entire time.
And practically no lines. Like, she has that one bit, that one scene, and that's it. And John, I know exactly that is absolutely spot on. Like, why would you get Redgrave? Why would you even spend the money to get Redgrave when you could get literally anybody else on such a low-end position? And I remember there was a story about the director of Princess Diaries was working with the author, and she's the author of the book that the screenplay was based off of, and it was mainly about the princess and her father. Like, that was the main relationship of the book. And she was reading the screenplay, and the author was reading the screenplay, went to the director and said, "What's the deal? Why are you living up the grandma so much?" And then the director says, "Oh, we're building up the grandma because we could get Julie Andrews." And the author's like, "Oh yeah, do that. Because why wouldn't you? If you can get Julie Andrews, you make that the focus. If you can get Vanessa Redgrave, you make her a focus." And even though, like earlier, I talked about how this is an ensemble piece, this is an ensemble piece, and there's Vanessa Redgrave. It would have been much nicer if we were able to say this is a ensemble piece, and there you go.
Yeah, I think that I think it's probably just a victim of the fact that it has been like, that's what makes me so interested to read the book, is I'm like, I feel like that's a character that got screwed in whatever rewrites they did. I feel like they got Redgrave and then they made changes after, because we all know they change the scripts after they get, blah, blah, blah. That's just how it works. I think that's a character that probably in the book is much more believably and satisfyingly drawn out, because there's no other reason to ever end up on the boat with Holmes at the end unless there's been something more significant. Now, that's not to say that, chasing somebody through the charnel house that they're being, filtered through to be sold off into human bondage to pay off a gambling debt from Monaco is insignificant. I'm just saying that Holmes and she should have had more opportunity to connect together, like gone on the run when other people were fighting the bad Baron and stuff like that. I mean, and there's also, and this is where I'll throw Ross under the bus as a director again. Like, there's even the moment of like, oh, okay, well, it's probably something that came over from the book. Oh, well, we grabbed the nun, but when we killed her. And I'm like, that's something that you could have excised from this completely with absolutely no detriment to the story. And you wouldn't have had this extremely awkward moment where, they're having like a madcap comic chase around the thing with Joel Grey. And then you had to constantly say to yourself, oh, wait, there's a dead nun with her throat cut in the bed through this whole thing. That's not funny. And you shouldn't have funny things happening right now. Like, you raise the stakes too much. And I know I went off on like a little tangent there, but like, I think that take the nun out, give an extra scene to Vanessa Redgrave, have them almost meet, have them almost get her back, that sort of thing. That's a rewrite that you do, as opposed to leaving dead nun in the bed through this extended sequence.
Well, I think that's the thing. Like, you hit on one of my main complaints besides the structure is the tone. Like, what tone are you going for? Because there were certain moments when I thought, oh, they're going to do this tongue in cheek. That could be interesting. Mm-hmm. Where every once in a while it's going to be like a wink to the audience, or it's not going to be like slapstick or a parody, but they, maybe they'll be able to recognize that they're being ridiculous here and there. And I feel like they were kind of walking that line and achieved neither. Yeah. Because of situations like that, where like you have that like they see the bad guy in the restaurant and they all hop up and they're going to chase after him. And you realize that they're playing it kind of ridiculous to the point where
chase scene was so odd.
Yeah, and then like Freud like even grabs his food right before he runs away. Right. Like things like that happen, or like how ridiculous Holmes was with the Bloodhound. Things like that. There was these moments of levity here and there. Either lean into it or don't, because what happens is you end up with a nun and her throat cut, and then they're cracking jokes while there's a dead body literally right next to Freud.
Yes, and dead bodies are typically not funny unless it's Weekend at Bernie's. That's the only time that I can think of offhand that dead bodies are funny.
Yeah, no, I think you're absolutely right, John. They could have taken that whole part out. She was already going with him willingly,
right?
And then they both go willingly because he spins a little tail. So yeah, but that chase was so odd because he clearly sees them. They clearly see that he sees them. and yet they're still following each other like step by step. And it's like, what is happening? Like all the little chases were kind of weird. Like I like the concept of the flower one where, oh, she left a trail. I'm like, oh, that's great. And then, oh, but it didn't matter because Freud figured it out too, and he beat you there. I'm like, oh, so it didn't matter. Okay.
Additionally, if the flowers had been slightly smaller than,
They were
4 foot long lilies, I mean, was that supposed to be funny? But also, the comedic timing being completely off with, the chase would have been silly, I guess, if it had been faster. But instead, you're like, oh, all right, he opened another door. And I'm going to double back to the horse because everybody heard me groan when you said the horse thing was,
right.
Was what they were going for. That entire scene, I was sitting there and I was just thinking to myself through the entire thing, man, modern editing has really come a long way since 1976. Because I'm just looking at the way that it was obviously they just film the horses running in a circle. All right, get the horses out. Now we're going to drop the actors in. We're going to have them run around the same space. Okay, bring the stunt guys in, have somebody running the horses around in a circle. You might see them in a shot, but that's fine. And you go around and it's like, I'm just sitting there. I'm like, it was so silly because it also had no real impact on anything. You could lift that whole horse thing out and it does nothing. It's like Starkiller base. There's no point to it.
Give like a line where the Baron's known for raising horses, something to connect it to the villain. So at least it's like a thread, but it was just like, so, we got these horses that Bob knows a guy, so we could put that in the movie. Oh, okay. Like that's as connected as it felt.
Right.
To say it was not very. Well, I feel the more we circle this drain, the more we're going to regret our discussion. So as we start to talk about our different ratings, for me, it was also interesting because I found more references for another version of Holmes, the Great Mouse Detective, the cartoon with the rat. But in that one, they also have a bloodhound who is named Toby. And I'm like, oh, that's where it comes from. We have, I know he's been in other things, I'm assuming, but I like things like that where you have, it's not just a random named dog. It's a dog that is Holmes' dog. And I'm like, that's really cool. For the 7% solution, I mean, we're just giving it marks for a really weird title. Like it spells out percent in 2 words, and that just keeps tripping me up. But all that to say, I am going to give this movie, I'm giving it a 2. And the only reason I'm not giving it a 1 is because I actually really like Arkin's performance. I think he does a really good job with Freud, and if I were rewatching anything, I would be to rewatch his part. Again, nothing against Holmes. He was good as well, but that they had the right person, I think, to carry this. What if these 2 characters met story? Like they cast it right. So I'm giving him 2 stars for that. Tristan, lead us off with your rating for the 7%.
I think I'm going to give it 2.5. I think this is. I don't think it's the worst movie ever, but I also don't think it's very good. And like 2.5 is just like straight down to media. I don't know. What did I give the previous movies? Could you?
So you gave 39 a 1.5, and you gave 59 a 2. So
I'm giving this 2.5. I'm giving this a 2.5 because I did like this more than 59, but not by much. I feel like it was a nice ensemble. There were certain things that I really enjoyed. There were certain conversations that I enjoyed. I felt like the portrayal of Holmes was spot on. I really liked it, how sporadic and crazy it was at times, but also methodical. And Arkin was a delight. Duvall was interesting, even though Redgrave was underutilized. I 2.5. It's mediocre. It's you can't recommend it, but it's also not the worst thing ever.
I know. I almost wish we kind of needed to do a recap of what this movie was about at the very beginning, because as we got into our discussion, I was like, do people even have any idea what this, like, we usually assume the viewer has maybe seen this movie. I didn't even know this movie existed. So all that to say, dear listener, hopefully you were able to look up at least the IMDb summary. But John, take us through your thoughts on the 7% Solution.
I wind up giving it a 2.5 because I thought it was. I thought the last hour, I was like, oh, okay, all right, it came together. It's kind of going along here. There are other problems I had, but they were surmountable problems. I think that first hour and 20 minutes is it's tough to get through. I do admire that Nicol Williamson trying to just contextualize it. I don't know if this is true or not, but it feels like he's the first one to really try something super different with Holmes and make Holmes more flawed than superhuman in his self, which I can respect. And of course, he would go on to play, I believe, Merlin in Excalibur, and of course, Cagliostro in Spawn. So an illustrious career in front of him after 7% Solution. But so 2.5 from me. Will I ever watch this again? Probably not, but I do have to give Williamson and Arkin credit, even if the psychoanalysis stuff was just, I don't know, man. I don't know. We talked about why would you cast Redgrave? I don't know why you cast Olivier in this. I was like, what? Okay, sure. That's fine. Anyway, 2.5. That's it.
All right. Well, we're going to be jumping at least another decade as we continue through the wing of Sherlock Holmes. Next week, we're covering young Sherlock Holmes. Is it a prequel? Is it a sequel from 1985 here on Houselights?
Join the revolution. Join the Nerd Party.